I think the most difficult part of Tales from the Dance Floor to write was about my friend Amber, who died at 41 and sadly from cancer. And of course, at 41 you think you're going to live forever. And she was 6 months pregnant at the time with her fourth child, and it was a little girl called Matilda. And I am godfather to Monty Revel, who's been named after me, who is her eldest son. And unfortunately, she didn't know about the cancer because she'd had babies literally back to back. And all the three kids, there's two boys and a girl, all under the age of 5 at the time. And she was 6 months pregnant, as I said, with Matilda. And she then discovered she had cancer of the bowel, of the liver, of the lung. I mean, it had spread through her entire body. And she only had, well, she was given a couple of months to live. And we were all devastated. And then she had to make that horrendous sort of decision whether or not to try and go to the full term of the pregnancy or whether to terminate the pregnancy and try and live a little bit longer by using chemotherapy and radiotherapy. She decided to terminate the pregnancy so she'd be able to settle all of her earthly wares, if you like, and be sort of domestic and also prolong her life for a few more months in order to spend time, her last moments with the children. So that was really, really difficult to cope with. It was also a huge shock, and we couldn't quite believe it because she's such a beautiful person and she didn't look ill at all, and that's just the weirdest thing, and when we got the news, everybody just really clubbed together and tried to help her. And the reason I told that story, because her legacy sort of lives on. Obviously, she died, and they needed some money to buy. The family needed money to pay for the funeral and also to pay for the headstone of Amber. And I was walking past the house, and I saw that her stag, her prized possession, which was a Triumph stag, a car that her mother had owned, and her mother, of course, sadly went the same way when she was 41. So Amber, all her life, was saying, because I've known her for over 20 years, was always saying, I never had a mother, and, my mum died at 41 from cancer, and I never really got to know, and I want my family to know me, and all of that. So it was just history repeating itself. And the stag was a sort of symbol and an emblem, I suppose, of her family history, because it was her mother's car, and then she had the same car. And I couldn't stand seeing the for sale sign. Her husband had put the for sale sign on the car, and I walked past and I couldn't stand it being sold. I wanted it to stay in the family, as it were, and as Monty Revel is my godson, I thought, I'm going to buy the stag. So I rang Mark. I said, darling, I will buy the stag. He said, but you can't drive. I said, I know, I still want the stag. I said, how much do you want for it? He said, well, I just want to pay for Amber's headstone. So we went up to the funeral directors, worked out how much the headstone was going to cost, and that was like 3,500 or whatever pounds. And I said, whatever it costs, I will buy it, and we'll get the headstone. So we did that, and then I had the car loaded onto a lorry and taken away because it was so rusty. It had been outside for 6 years and just completely rusted up. But it's a family heirloom, so I thought, so that motivated me to then have to get my driving license. So I set about to do that. So that the stag went off for restoration, and that took a year to restore. During that year, I got my license. I had a 7-week window, and there are a million stories in Tales from the Dance Floor about my driving escapades. But every time I get into the car, I passed. First time, thank goodness, because if I didn't, I'd have to wait another year, and then I'd be paying for this car that I couldn't use. And then I got into the car, and every time I go into the car and every time I drive it, I think of her. And of course, the car is named after her dog that died, called Ralph. So and that's part of the number plate, RLF. So every time I drive it, I think, Amber, love you, darling, and it's there, and I'm going to gift it to Monty Revel when he's 21. He's only 7 at the moment, so I'm going to be holding on to it for a few more years yet and get some pleasure and joy out of it. But I think it belongs in the family. So it was wonderful to write about that, and also it was wonderful to talk to Mark, her husband, about it as well, because we hadn't really discussed her death and how he was getting on. So just writing that particular chapter was so cathartic. I can't tell you. It was amazing because we could speak 2 years on sort of liberally about it. And there's a lot of people out there that will associate and understand what it's like to go through and sort of sympathise and also empathise and also become a little bit more enlightened and hopefully live for the present rather than the future. And I think that's generally what I've learned from several of my friends dying in the last 4 years, all under 50, that I now live for the present and not always for the future. And I think that's so important. Well, it is for me. And of course, Tales from the Dance Floor is littered with stories from people backstage, of course, as well at Strictly Come Dancing, because they're my fans. They're the people that are interested in the book. And I've written honestly about just about every single one of them that have been on the programme. You know, some good stories, some bad stories, some funny stories, but it's generally a book about my life as a dancer and all the stuff I couldn't fit into my last book, All Balls and Glitter. Of course, you get 300 pages, and one's life is so vast, you know, and full of interest that I used some of the stuff that I couldn't use in All Balls and Glitter in this one and continued the story on. And then, of course, it's littered with very, very funny stories about Anne Widdecombe and how she was my complete and absolute nemesis and the most unlikely person that I would ever become friends with. And we have become the best friends ever. I mean, it's really quite extraordinary. If you had have told me, literally 3 years ago, that I would be best friends with Anne Widdecombe, I would say, you are joking, you know. And actually it's worked out brilliantly. And of course that came about because I was asked to do the Strictly Come Dancing live tour as a judge, which goes to arenas all over the country. And Anne was asked to be on it, and they wanted me to be her dance partner. And of course I went, no way. And then I thought 5 minutes about it, and I thought, actually, this could be very, very funny because I direct and write the show. So I thought that would be hilarious, and it was. You know, there were 20,000 people standing in the aisles, all literally just loving the whole concept of it. So we did a Charleston together, badly, but it was great fun. And since that moment, I then employed her to do 2 years of panto with me. So we've been really, literally, the Laurel and Hardy of, you know, 2011, 12 and 13, really. I mean, it's been absolutely amazing. So I've littered the whole book with little moments like that, and some interesting ones for the Strictly Come Dancing fans about Arlene Phillips and how we felt as judges, because we've never been asked about how we actually felt or what actually really went on and the truth behind Arlene leaving the show, well, not leaving, you know, not being re-employed. And of course, Alicia Dixon coming on board and how I had to defend her for the 3 years, and then suddenly she went off to Britain's Got Talent without a word, and you know, just a little bit of my disappointment, I suppose, in not even receiving a text message or anything, you know, from her. It was like really quite cold. But then I suppose TV is like that, you know, and I think you have to be very aware of it. So in the book I've written a lot of that, and of course about Darcy Bustle as well joining us and how wonderful that's been. I wrote about my first sort of moments on television and how I was slightly concerned about going into something that was so public, because I'm not really a public person. Up until that point I was a director, choreographer, and I'd won loads of awards, and I was up in the high sort of echelons of directors and choreographers in the theatre in this country, and known within the industry but not certainly by the general public. And I was anonymous, and I could sit in a darkened theatre and actually get on with the job and do it. But of course, with Strictly, it's been completely different. As soon as I'd done the show, I'd walk out my front door, and then suddenly I'm attacked by millions of people and fans and stuff. So suddenly, one minute you're nobody, and then the next minute you can't move in the supermarket. You know, for people sort of giving you their opinions and either loving you or hating you, and then you know, with the advent of Twitter and all of that, I mean, it's just insane. So it did take me a long time to regroup and train myself to not be shy, to be able to go out in public, be a public speaker, and also come to terms with being famous for being a judge on a TV series. It just made no sense to me at all. But of course, I use that celebrity now for good. And I do it for National Osteoporosis Society, and I wrote a lot about that and how I met Camilla, the Duchess of Cornwall, of course, and how our relationship has really fired up, and the fact that I danced with her and was on the 6 o'clock news all around the world, you know, and just how I met her. You know, I think people at home will find that really interesting, how, you know, someone like me, if you've read my first book, All Balls and Glitter, you know, drag queen, sort of rent boy, then suddenly becomes best friends and mates with the future Queen of England. It's all a bit bizarre, but I think it's wonderful, you know, as well, that we can raise money for charity, raise awareness for Macmillan. Of course, I support them because of Amber and her cancer, and also the National Osteoporosis Society because my mother has arthritis and it's crippling her. So I wanted to do stuff for the charities, you know, with my newfound celebrity that I've managed to do. So in the book, there is a lot of that, and of course, all my theatrical escapades, because people do wonder what I do during the year. If I'm just a Saturday job on Strictly, what do I do during the year? And this is the book really pads that out and allows people to know me for who I am, rather than just a person that's vile that holds paddles from 1 to 10. Well, I think celebrity has. I didn't work for a long time because everyone thought I was like the person on the television. So that was quite difficult to deal with because what I love doing and my passion is theatre. That sort of was escaping me, but now I've got back into the swing of doing a lot of theatre, and I've really found it fantastic. And I suppose some of the best work I've ever done is at the Watermill Theatre, where I've done shows like Spend, Witches of Eastwick, which I've just recently done, and I suppose there's many highlights. Fiddler on the Roof is on at the moment, starring Paul Michael Glaser, of course, who was Starsky and Hutch. And that was a tough show to do, but it was rewarding. And of course, I've had many ups and downs in my life, relationship-wise, that some people can't cope with my celebrity, so they've left me because of that. Some people, I had to live with, my partner was living with depression, and I had 4 years of that. So that finished, and now I'm single. I suppose Witches of Eastwick and Fiddler on the Roof, my most recent ones, have been the freest ones and the most enjoyable because I don't have to go home and cook a lasagna for someone and think about them. I'm concentrating on me, my work and my happiness, and just living from day to day and enjoying my life.